Okay, good afternoon everyone. My name is Sean, I'll be your MC for this afternoon. Hope you enjoyed the lunch break with some great food out there, some great conversation. I'd once again like to thank our sponsors. Insert sponsors here, it says on that. Next up though, I would like to introduce Joe Simpson Jr. with the Back on the Block, My Reasons for Returning to the Full Site Editor. Joe is a front-end developer and user experience designer specializing in accessible enterprise-level WordPress solutions. When a hard event forced him to take a leave of absence, he attended his first meetup, beginning an incredible 8-year journey that included giving back to the WordPress community in roles ranging from volunteer, speaker, team rep on the Make WordPress Accessible team, contributor day table lead, community summit moderator, WordPress lead organizer at both the local and flagship levels, and started 3 WordPress meetups, including 2 in Santa Clarita, California, and Blackpress with 2 other automaticians. After 3 decades as a public servant at Metro Los Angeles Transit, managing their blog network, he retired to present topics on WordPress and open source tech in emerging and underrepresented communities around the world. Ladies and gentlemen, Joe Simpson.
Yeah, thank you. All right, before we get started, I'm going to do a weird dad kind of thing. So, I'm going to pass out candy from Los Angeles. So, this candy is from C's Candies. If you're in LA, you pass through the airport, you always see this. But these are Halloween themed. So, I'm going to pass one this way and pass one that way. So, all right. Testing. Hey, Jojo. Remember that time we went on our first family vacation? Our daughter was old enough. We hopped on a plane, and we ended up in the Dominican Republic. And that day, you were a star. All of the tourists around the pool, they kept going, Jojo. And every time you jumped in the water, and each time they did it, you did it over and over and over again. We happened to have an underwater camera, and we took this picture. Or that time we went to Cancun, and we were visiting the Mayan ruins and doing all those kind of things vacationers do, but we had an unwelcome visitor. We were pinned in by a hurricane. And as the staff at the resort barricaded us in, instead of being scared, you said, Dad, pointing at the ceiling, there's a train up in the sky. You were a big fan of trains. As mentioned in the introduction, I worked for a transit agency, and when you were in daycare, we'd ride the train into Los Angeles together. You were a star. Everyone on the train would come by and say hi, the conductor, the engineer, and on your last day at daycare, before you started in elementary school, you actually got in the cockpit with the engineer and honked the horn. You remember when I would come home from work and you and Troy would meet me at the door with a book, and before I could do anything, I'd have to read. And so every night we'd read the same books over and over about trains. One of my favorite memories was when you started school. Your mom would always take a picture right when we left the driveway. The elementary school was on the corner, and one of my memories is after a few times when we would get close to the school, you dropped my hand. You were too embarrassed to hold Dad's hand. Now you may be wondering, what the heck does this have to do with WordPress? And why are you here today? Not to see my photo album, but I wanted to make a point. These pictures were from the first 8 years of my son's life. And a lot of us in the community, there was a point when we decided, hey, I'm going to let Full Site Editor, Gutenberg, mature on its own. I'm going to do this over here. I'm going to do page builders. I'm going to do whatever's new. And just imagine if 8 years of your life, I would say for me, imagine not being in my son's life or doing those day-to-day things for 8 years. You would miss out on a lot. So today, I'm going to tell you the reasons why I came back to the full site editor. This is going to be a very visual presentation. There's going to be a little bit of motion. I do a lot of work in the accessibility community, so I didn't want to offend anyone. But I'll have a link to some basic slides if you want to follow along, if motion bothers you. As mentioned, I worked for over 3 decades in public transportation, and our mission was to get folks out of their cars and onto trains. The ironic thing about Los Angeles is that way back in the day, we had trains everywhere, and when the cars came around, they ripped them all out. So my job over the past 3 decades was to put them back in and get people out of their cars. Before that, I worked in corporate identity and branding at Fortune 500 companies that happened to be going through mergers. Unisys Corporation, Chrysler Corporation, and at Metro in Los Angeles. And as mentioned, it's been a mission of mine to give back to the community. I'm going to share a story in a minute, but I really wanted to get out and talk about WordPress and share some of the experiences that I had back with the community, or give back. I tried to speak anywhere and everywhere, do a little bit of everything, and it was sort of the over-the-top intro to sort of share the idea that we can all give back and do more. I presented at WordCamp Asia, WordCamp San Jose, and Costa Rica. I would go anywhere and everywhere to talk about open source WordPress. My slides will be here. I'll bring this up again at the end of the session. But again, these are basic slides that are just a text version of what you see here. I'm a former designer, so I always have to do something visual. So you're here today for Back on the Block, my reasons for returning to the site editor. It's sort of a case study mixed in with like some ideas of where I want to go and learn and continue to grow in the WordPress community. I would love to hear from you, share your experiences. This should be a very interactive session, so please jump in whenever you can. My WordPress story started way back, and I'm not going to say when our lead developer and CSS Goddess, they both left our company within a month of each other. And me, a Dreamweaver HTML person, dabbling, from the design side, I was given a WordPress site. It was our news blog, The Source, which when they launched it, they wanted to do 5 stories a day. It was sort of the news arm of our transit agency was getting a lot of slack. We were getting a lot of flack for, there was like a part of the tunnel sank and we were on 60 Minutes. And so they wanted to give the other side of the story. So we brought in some Pulitzer Prize winning writers and they got to it. So imagine me, a designer type, inheriting a WordPress site. Fortunately for us, we had a little bit of budget. They were able to send me to the WordPress VIP Intensive Workshop in Napa Valley, California. But I wasn't a designer. I wasn't a developer, I should say. But something amazing happened. The first day, they asked us to spin up a virtual box. And after I picked my job off the floor, something amazing happened. In every direction that you could reach your arm, someone turned to help. And that was when I learned about what the WordPress community is or what it means. And so from that point on, I continued to build in WordPress and learn slowly but surely. And as mentioned, I had a heart event in 2017. Once I did that, I started going to meetups, getting back into WordPress, and I did anything and everything. So this is the before times. This was what I inherited. It was a premium theme that our lead developer and CSS Goddess picked. And how many of us know what the before times were in terms of themes? This was a premium theme. It was called Headway, and unfortunately, our CSS Goddess, they hard-coded it. So every time we would update the theme, it would just go back, it would revert back. So I inherited something like this. Fortunately, I was able to go to the VIP Intensive Workshop, and I started child theming. Another cool thing was that we were able to move over to WordPress VIP for a couple of years. We were a government agency. Our budget is approved year to year. And these were some of the things that they offered. I have a lot of bullet points, and I apologize. I'm not really going to go through them in depth, but we wanted consistent hosting. Anytime we had a question, especially as I was learning, I wanted to have an answer. Also, it gave me the discipline to commit code and do it in a certain manner with VIP. So it gave me a crash course in how to get up to speed fast, but try to build in a consistent fashion that the folks at WordPress VIP wanted. So that was a good thing. This was what we came up with. They offered a series of themes. We wanted our news blog. We also had a Spanish version. We were able to leverage one theme and do a child theme for both and do a lot of features in a more visual format using the Bromley theme. Then something amazing happened. Back for my first WordCamp US that I attended in person, the keynote, or Matt's State of the Word, was about this thing called Gutenberg that was coming. And as we sat outside the room, I actually happened to be sitting next to Ben Rittner, who created Cadence Themes, and he was telling me about this amazing block product that he developed that he was going to launch. And that sort of set me up for what I was going to hear later. At that point, a lot of us in the community said, hey, I'm going to let that mature, and I'm going to stick with this, stick with that. During that WordCamp as well, there was a group in the back of the sponsor area with a big E on top of their sponsor booth. And they were talking about this thing called page builders. And it sounded amazing. So as a designer, it looked like Adobe Illustrator. It had some of the, it allows you more flexibility. So I said, hey, I want to learn that at the same time. Oops. But before we did Elementor, we also looked at Beaver Builder, which was out at the same time. And one of the things that we decided on in terms of using Beaver Builder was it had a Bootstrap background. And so what our UX and design team were interested in was having Bootstrap involved in our designing process. So we started with that. And we wanted to be more in keeping with our design studio. Our design studio is award-winning, been featured in magazines and things like that. And our brand was very, very apparent and identifiable. So they really had a lot of say around the agency. So we had to make it look like they wanted. So this is some screens from it and a couple of interesting features. It was weird because when designers are in charge, you kind of can do some crazy things, or you're asked to do some crazy things and you want to toss them out the window. But they wanted things like the menu, each individual menu to match the page, which is a weird request. So for example, the green matches here, which is something you never think to do. But it did force me to learn how to do some different CSS things. But they wanted more. Our marketing people, they felt like, the web guys always take too long. We need it the same day. We want to be able to design these things ourselves as well as lay out the pages, which is a recipe for disaster. There was one time when one of our project leads on our projects team, each time Metro does something in the community, like for instance, when we extended the line to Santa Monica or went to North Hollywood, we would spin up what we call a boutique site. Something like it's sort of like seeing a brochure, but online, just for that particular event when the grand opened, and then we would fold it into our information. So each time something spun up, we would spin up a site. So one of the downsides of giving people access is that she liked to look around and she actually crashed the site. So they wanted more control. But again, we all know that when you give too much control without constraints, you can blow things up. So we transitioned all of our sites over to Elementor because they offered even more control. But one of the things that I always saw them at WordCamps, I was able to ask questions, and they had it wasn't just a premium product like Beaver Builder. Back to the source. One bad thing happened. Due to its success, when I set it up, it was really just a tool for our editors to get in and write. I maintained the back end. It had a solid design, and they just cranked and cranked and cranked. One bad thing happened, and it was mentioned in the prior speech over here, the prior presentation. The theme deprecated. One of the bad things about being in a politically run organization, our board of directors are like the mayor of Los Angeles, city councilman. So each time we would start a redesign process, there would be some turnover and it would stop. So during that period, our theme deprecated. It started crashing because there were plugin conflicts. The theme was out of date. And so we were forced a couple of years ago to consider a redesign. We looked at not just page builders, but thinking about coming back to Gutenberg or a block builder, and we broke it down into all the pros and cons. And we came up with this. This is Newspack, which is produced by the Automatic folks, but it's a premium product. One of the good things about it was that it had a lot of pre-built things. So as I was learning blocks, I would be able to see what someone else has done, see some of the discipline and guidelines that they used in terms of building something. And I was able to just quickly get something up. It was also, it's a product that was really geared towards saving newspapers around the country. So a lot of publications, similar to what we were doing, used it. Again, here's some of the cons, and the biggest one was that for a public agency, we didn't have $750 a month. So what will we do? One of the cool things about this community, I'll jump back a step. One of the good things about it was that it had 6 different out-of-the-box layouts that we could sort of pick one and sort of customize it to our brand. It also had a number of different block variations out of the box. So we appreciated that as well. As I mentioned, it was a premium product. So how would we use it in our setting? Fortunately, I saw this article on WP Tavern. They had a way to self-host it, but the big downside was that how would we update it? How would we do automatic updates? I'm a big fan of updating consistently. And again, when we use the source, things started crashing, there was conflicts. And so for me, I love for things to automatically update the background, which may piss some people off in the community. But I saw this article, and one of the cool things about our community is that when there's a problem, somebody writes a plugin or a fix. And so I saw this article, and it saved us. It was a plugin that would go out and check GitHub, which is where we pulled the theme and the plugins from, and update it for us. So that solved one problem. This is what we came up with. Again, it was a newsletter style, block base. And one of the cool things about our agency is that we had, over the lifespan of the source, we've had over 100 editors. So it's not just our marketing team, it's the people that build the projects, the project heads, the department heads that write as guest editors. So they wanted a way to quickly distinguish all the different groups and have something very visual, like a newspaper or an online magazine, that you can quickly jump in and quickly get an idea of what was going on. What I also tried to do was provide some flexibility in terms of projects come online, go offline, things like that. So they had the ability to change everything on the page through the editor. Again, these are the different sections or groups, and they were all featured on the page. And if they wanted to highlight something, like for instance, there was a bus strike, or there was, during the pandemic, service was canceled, they would want to stick something up in the left-hand corner. So there was a definite hierarchy in terms of information. One of the things and we all work in WordPress, the out-of-the-box search kind of sucks. So we just took one little step up. Again, as a public agency, we just used Jetpack Search, which improved our search quite a bit. And we went through and cleaned up the tags, and we did so I did a lot of that work to try to improve our search as well. Again, it was based on the projects and categories. One of the downsides about creating a product for a client and letting them just run with it, it was that I think we had like 20,000 categories and like 100,000 tags over 20 years. So I cleaned all that up, and it improved our search quite a bit. This is a sample of one of the pages once you drill down. Again, it was sort of newsletter style with big bold images, a way to interact with the group. We also had estimated time. We did a lot of things that weren't around 18 years ago. And again, these were part of the blocks or plugins that we were able to utilize from the community. Another thing about LA, it's a very diverse city. And one of the edicts or specifications or requirements for our web information is that it has to be in multiple languages. So I proposed to have a translate in the menu, as well as on each page that an editor can drop in case they wanted to really emphasize something in a specific language. And again, these were blocks that I created so they can reuse them. Again, learning about blocks, learning to try to leverage it and improve the editorial process. On the back side, this was a big change for our editors. In the community, there was a big backlash, and a lot of people wanted to keep the classic editor. We transitioned our team over. They were classic editor users, but a couple of the benefits was the ability to work within your editing area. Before, and one of the problems with our previous site was that we had to have, it was so old, and again, don't laugh, we had to plug in to bring in a YouTube video or add a PDF, it was that old. So now it was a big adjustment for them to be able to just click on something in the menu and drop in a video, or just copy paste a URL. So again, this may be funny to us as a community, but for the editor who's not technical, this was a big change. So again, there was a little bit of training that we had to put together for our team. But again, they were super and they were pretty receptive. Another thing at a government agency, and those of us that follow the news or try to avoid it, politicians are always bragging about what they've achieved. And then our agency is no different. So they always wanted the ability to say, hey, for this post, we had this many in keeping with this holiday kind of thing. So they wanted the ability to see stats quickly and easily. And so we found a plugin that was tied in with the theme. Because again, this theme came with a bundle of plugins that they recommended. And again, it was run by Automatic. So we trusted a lot of those. And this is the Google site plugin. One of the things that is the downside is that this is generally a WordPress.com product, but for me, being sneaky, as an organizer and meetup leader, a couple of WordCamp Europes ago, one of the community people during the Q&A, they said, hey, why can't meetups have free hosting? And so Matt said, okay, if you have a meetup, we'll put you on WordPress.com. So what that allowed me to do was now I can test out a lot of the features that are in WordPress.com and learn while using an active live site or in a test environment as well. So this was our meetup page. So I suggest today, for all of you that, hopefully not many of you are a lot of you are using the full site editor, but if you're not, just take another look. A lot's changed. You can incorporate a lot to make your skill set better, but also improve what you put out into the space and stay in sync with what's going on with WordPress. One of the things I fear in using like a page builder or something like that is that they've deviated so far away from a block solution is that they'll be so far at a point that they can never come back. So what do you do at that point, especially as a business? So here are my reasons summed up quickly. I always hope that whatever I learn, I have the ability to learn from someone else. So they put out a lot of good pathways on WordPress.org as well as on .com from a lot of the folks that you'll see in the community, a lot of familiar faces. So these are some great resources in terms of learning. So that's a big one, especially if I have to turn around and teach someone. I want the ability to quickly learn and grasp concepts. And the other great thing is that if you look to your left or right, there's a lot of people that are makers sitting next to you or very talented people. So again, the cool thing about this community is that a lot of times if you ask a question, people will answer it. For example, when I was at WordCamp US, I participated in Contributor Day, and so I wanted to talk to the Learn guys. So the faces that were in the video was there. I saw Nick, I asked him a few questions. I also saw Wes, I asked him a few questions. So again, this community is so supportive in terms of you learning. Just look to your left or right. And I'm going to put her on the spot. But sitting over there is one of the most incredible teachers that I know in this space, Courtney. So again, they're always so welcoming and encouraging, and they help empower you to learn. So the other thing is that as these new tools come online, again, we may have excuses just on .com, et cetera, et cetera. A lot of things are still happening. So again, I would encourage you to play around with some of these things. Playground or Site Studio are really coming along and offering new options that allow you to test and learn right on your local device or integrate with a service like .com. For me, as a graphic designer turned web guy, it's important to have some sort of connection back to the design side. So I love the style book. It reminds me of creating a brand manual back in the day, or just looking at brand standards and trying to implement them on the web. Again, for our local meetup site, having the ability to do things globally as well as visually in the style book is something that's cool. And for example, when we're spinning up our WordCamp for Santa Clarita for next year, and this is a weird hobby of mine, I love to draw type. So I drew the type and I imported it. So there's a number of different ways. Things have changed, but it also makes it a little easier to do a lot of the things that we had to do through code in the past. So again, learn is sort of my philosophy as to why I've switched over. Again, this is another screen from the style book that allows you to see the type, the different colors that you chose for your brand. And then of course, AI is coming. So a lot of good things are happening, but again, if you don't really stay on top of it, you'll have to catch up. But one of the cool things, again, when I was at US, Brigitte was there, and she's one of the Gutenberg folks, and she was just walking by when we were having a coffee. Like generally when we're at WordCamps, I try to get our group, or anybody from Southern California, anybody who wants to attend, we usually do a coffee thing. And she was just walking by and she came in and did like a little AMA for our group. So again, a lot of the things that you want to learn, people want to share it, because again, our community is only as strong as what we build and what we share with each other. So again, try to stay on top of it, try to learn. And these are some of the resources I mentioned. This is Brigitte's podcast. And again, some of the new things that are coming are distilled down in her podcast is more technical. So again, I'm more designer style, but if you're a developer, this would speak to you. Tammy Lister, during the month of October, she is building something with telex each day. So this is an interesting experiment. So you can see what someone in the community is building and interact with them, ask questions kind of thing, and see what they're doing with blocks.
That website was blocktober.fun.
Yeah, and it's...
You missed the address.
Yep, and it'll be in my slides also. And yesterday, Ryan did part of Contributor Day, and he had a couple of sessions on doing things with the blocks. And I think he's going after me today. So again, I see my role as sort of, this is where you should look to find more and learn more. So I would suggest, if you really want to learn more about the behind the scenes of blocks, check him out next hour. Here are some resources. I always like to share a lot of resources when I do these talks. And again, like Courtney mentioned, Blocktober, there's a link there. There's a link to the Gutenberg Changelog podcast, Ryan's YouTube channel with a lot of his cookbook in terms of the block developer, and then so on. Again, if you're just new to full site editor, there's some beginning level courses on the link list, as well as some things that are a little more advanced. And again, if you really want to just burn a weekend of your life kind of thing, you can go through all the lessons. The next thing is to contribute. Again, Contributor Day was great. The interesting thing was that if you're into AI, the most popular table at the past 2 Contributor Days was the AI table. So again, reach out to the folks that know everything about AI and learn more. But also, an important thing that I always try to get across is to get involved. I was on the Make Accessibility team, and one of the things that I felt guilty about, and that I always talk to Joe Dolson about to this day, is that I was a designer, and he was always asking for people to test and help test and help test. So the past 2 Contributor Days, I've been going to the training table and the testing table to learn how to do more. So again, if you have some skill in development, or you just really want to help out in